Hello and welcome to yesterday's airlines for the very latest in 400 scale news, and this video is the latest in my series discussing who's who in 400 scale diecast and 3D printed nowadays models. As you can see, there are a ton of different brands around in the scale. In fact, there are more every week. I know of at least 3 or 4 that I've heard coming which aren't on this diagram, and the aim of these videos is to discuss this, look at who these people are, what they're making, and whether the models are any good. So there are tons of these videos still left to do, but I'm trying to get through some, and today's brand is one of my favorites. It is Undefined Collectibles, another of those slightly more unusual brands that you may not have heard of because they're mainly available on the Chinese market. Now, before we get into looking at those, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here at Yesterday's Airlines, because there's always tons of new material coming up and you've got to stay tuned to get the news. And also don't forget to check out my sponsor, Northeast Diecast, who've got an amazing range of 200 and 400 scale models that go right back through the history of both scales, and they've got a really impressive selection that they've acquired through various collection sales and such, and loads of rare models. So check them out, and when you do, don't forget to use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order at Northeast Diecast. It makes a massive difference and it's well worth taking a look. So check them out. But let's get on and look at Undefined Collectibles. And first up, who are Undefined Collectibles? As I say, they're the sort of brand you probably won't have heard much about if you are looking mainly on the Western market, because I don't think their models are sold anywhere in the West. I've only seen them certainly through Chinese Taobao sites. But Undefined Collectibles is a brand run by a nice guy called Nelson, and Nelson is really interested in getting out there with his own 400s scale brand, and their focus is more towards Chinese airliners, as you can see and as you would expect, being one which you can only really get through Chinese sites, but typically slightly more classic Chinese airliners, looking at the diverse history of Chinese aviation. So that is who Undefined Collectibles are. How often do they release? Well, they are at the mercy of the manufacturers that they work with, but they've released a decent number of models now, and they tend to release them in little clumps, 2 or 3 each month here and there. They've been going since March 2024. And as I said, what do they make? Well, they make a range of mainly classic Chinese airliners. The first release in March 2024 was an Air China Airbus A319 B2404 with the slightly thicker cheat lines. And then a couple of months later in June, they came up with another couple of Chinese, well, one's a prop, but I guess technically it's a jet. And that's the first ATR 72 delivered to China, B3022. And that was partnered up with, at the other end of the scale really, an Air China 747-200 B2446. The very next month, they announced another model, and this one was a collaboration with Creating Dreams Wings. That's another brand which we've already looked at here in the Who's Who, so check out that video if you didn't look at that. And that was a China Southern 737-800. And then there was a bit of a break before a few models were released towards the end of 2024. First of those was an China Southern 777-500, the last 737-500, with China Southern at B2912, and a pair of China Eastern MD-11s, B2173 and B2174. Rounding off 2024 were 2 more announcements. The first of those was another Air China. This one was in the Phoenix scheme, a 737-800 B5422, and then the 800th E-Jet, which was delivered to China Southern and had that little panda motif on. How many Chinese airlines have got pandas on? Into 2025, and the first announcement of the year was in March, and this one was a Xiamen Airlines 757-200 in the current scheme, B2862. And then, obviously, they had the Hobby Expo in Beijing, where they announced 4 different models 3 of which were Airbus A330s, B6101 and B5912, Air China Star Alliance Series 300s, and then B6119, a Yunnan Feather China Eastern, plus also their first non-B-Reg model, DHL UK 767-300 with the Grand Tour Tail G Delta Hotel Lima Golf. Now that 767 is yet to be delivered, as is the China Eastern A330. However, there have been 2 subsequent models announced and released, and these are a pair of China Eastern Fokker 100s, B2231 and B2233. Undefined Collectibles has also announced some future releases which look pretty interesting. Regional types, we've got a Chang'an Airlines pair of Dash 8 Q400s, a couple of China Ocean Shipping Group Bombardier Challengers, a couple of China Express CRJ 900s, plus they've got some hints out for an array of E-Jets, some of which will almost certainly be Tianjin Airlines, and at least one Japanese 767 as well. So it'll be interesting to see what those models end up being, and they are, I believe, scheduled for probably early 2026, I would guess, and into mid-year. So on to the molds. Now, Undefined Collectibles are not making their own models. They're using other manufacturers, and of the 4 main manufacturers that produce models for others at the moment, they have used 3 of those. First up, Panda models. The first model they made, the Air China A319, uses the lovely little Panda models A319, and they've also used the 737-800 mold as well for that Air China Phoenix liner, and also for the China Southern, and that is equally as impressive as the A319. So they've had access to both of those narrow body types using the Panda molds. Additionally, with Panda, they have also utilized their spectacularly good McDonnell Douglas MD-11 for that pair of passenger MDs. Really, again, superb mold, and you know, I really like that release. Really pleased to have picked that one up. Now, the 767s that they've got coming, the G-Reg and that Japanese, they almost certainly will also be using the Panda models 767s as well. So keep an eye out for those, because again, those molds are superb. But you can see here also the Fokker 100, and that tells you that they're using JC wings for a lot of their other models, not just the Fokker 100s, but the ATR 72s, also that Air China 747, which has got the Big Bird mold, which is one in the JC Wings catalogue, plus types like the Embraer 190, which we're going to be seeing more of, and the 737-500, that old Gemini mold that JC Wings have, and the 757 was also using the JC Wings mold as well. So they've used quite a variety of molds throughout their period, mainly from JC Wings and Panda models, but also they dabbled with Aero Classics for those Air China A330s, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So what about the quality of Undefined Collectibles? Well, obviously, since they're using other brands to be their manufacturer, they will be getting models that are up to the standards of those other brands. So if you're comfortable buying from JC Wings and Panda, then you should be very comfortable getting models from Undefined Collectibles as well. Now, their models typically have also come with collector's cards. The very first release, the A319, came with just a card, collector's card, and I think that was criticized a little bit. But the later models, they had the much nicer and more solid plastic credit card style collector's cards. So they are super nice and gives that little bit of extra to those releases. Obviously, when you're using quite a variety of different aircraft types, the mold quality is going to be variable. The JC Wings molds don't typically reach the same levels, in my opinion, as the Panda models molds, but they're still pretty decent enough. The E-Jet and 737-500 both here are nice little models on perfectly decent, if not amazing molds. The Fokker 100 is one of JC Wings' better molds, and I really think that's an excellent mold. And the MD-11, as I said, for Panda here is really, really good. In fact, in general, I think the quality of the Panda ones has been really very impressive. So there have been some really good models, and it was certainly very nice to see Undefined Collectibles release that 77500 that I talked about, because that was a model which Gemini had released back in the day and was heavily impacted by zinc rot. So as you can see here, my Gemini version is full of zinc rot. I was super glad to be able to get a re-release from Undefined Collectibles, which I'm sure won't have those problems. The one low point for Undefined Collectibles so far, however, has been their dalliance with the Aero Classics factory, which they were using for the trio of A330s. Now, the pair that have been made are the Air China Series 300s, but in a quite unusual post in September themselves, Undefined Collectibles said that due to product quality issues, after considering various factors, the antenna was not installed in the initial model without drilling holes. The official full version of this product will be cancelled. And speaking with Nelson, basically it appears that the models were finished really poorly and just not up to the standard that he was willing to accept. So they are not going to release those on to the market. And the third A330, the China Eastern version, that one is going to be remanufactured by Kailin Model. And I know this has proven to be a major financial stress to Undefined Collectibles. So that is really sad. In fact, they've gone so far as to say they've decided to temporarily suspend plans for future released products. So it does seem that Undefined Collectibles may well be coming to the end as a brand after that last batch of JC Wings E-Jets and Dash 8s. And that's a real shame, but it appears that they were forced to accept and pay for these poor quality A330s from the AC factory, and that has been a real challenge for Undefined Collectibles. So that is a shame, but it's great that they noticed that they weren't up to the standard they were accepting and didn't want to push those out to collectors through their usual channels. So in summary, Undefined Collectibles is a brand that I've really enjoyed purchasing from. Nelson has been really friendly when I've spoken with him, and they've made a really interesting range of Chinese models, mostly towards the slightly more classic end of the scale for Chinese airliners, but with an upcoming tranche of Dash 8s and regional jets which are newer. They've primarily used the Panda models and JC Wings mold catalogues to produce quite a diverse array of different types, from E-Jets, Fokker 100s, Dash 8s, as I say, ATRs, all the way up to 747s and 767s and MD-11s. Plus, of course, they had that unfortunate dalliance with Aero Classics and their A330, but I don't think we should focus on that, because the rest of the models that I've got and have seen released have been really good. And I've picked up 6 of their releases at the present time, as you've been able to see from the video here, and I've really enjoyed them. They've all been really high quality models on some lovely little molds. So I've really liked what Undefined Collectibles have been producing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those new E-Jets. It's particularly exciting because they will be new to 400 scale for airlines that have not been made before on those types in the scale. So Undefined Collectibles is exactly the kind of brand that I like. They're trying to do something slightly different, something slightly new. Yes, they're mainly Chinese airliners, but they've also got that G-Reg 767 and a Japanese 767 up and coming too in the near future. So keep an eye out for more from Undefined Collectibles. I hope that they will not be put off by the problems they've had recently with the AC A330s, and they will produce more models next year, but they will definitely be producing those nice E-Jets and Dash 8 Q400s and CRJs in 2026, so you should definitely keep an eye out for those. For now, it is Taobao all the way, I believe. They do have their own store on Taobao, but the models are also found through a variety of other Taobao stores. So Undefined Collectibles has been a great little brand which has really helped me expand my Chinese fleet. Okay guys, well I hope you've enjoyed this look around another one of the little up and coming brands that has been out there in 400 scale, which you may not have heard of and whose models aren't always the easiest to find. That's it for this video. Don't forget to chuck a like on if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you very soon with more content here at Yesterday's Airlines. But for now, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.